I had just retired when my daughter-in-law called. "I'm dropping the kids off tomorrow. You're not working anymore, so you can watch them while I travel." Her words echoed in my quiet living room, each one landing like a stone. "After all, you don't do anything anymore." I smiled, though she couldn't see the way my hand trembled as I ended the call. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Not just for me, but for her, and for the children she took for granted. When she returned from her trip, the children hid behind me, their eyes wide and silent. The hush that filled the room was heavier than any words. That was the moment she realized something had shifted, that the woman she thought she could dismiss had finally drawn a line. But before I tell you what happened when she walked through that door, let me start at the beginning, because the story of how I found my voice and taught her a lesson she would never forget began long before that phone call. Retirement was supposed to be my time. For 45 years, I'd woken before dawn, packed lunches, ironed shirts, and worked double shifts to keep a roof over our heads after my husband died. I'd put my dreams on hold so my son could have his. I'd watched other people travel, take up hobbies, and spend lazy afternoons in the sun while I kept moving, always one step ahead of bills and worries. When I finally handed in my keys at the school, I thought I'd earned a little peace. I thought I'd finally have time to breathe. That afternoon, I sat in my favorite chair, a cup of tea warming my hands, and let myself imagine what the next chapter might hold. The coffee table was covered in travel brochures, Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, a train ride through the Rockies. I'd always wanted to see the world, to wake up somewhere new, to feel the thrill of possibility. For the first time in decades, the future felt wide open. Then the phone rang. I saw Brooke's name on the screen and hesitated. My daughter-in-law never called just to chat. She never called me Mom, never even Helen. It was always, "I need, can you, would you?" I answered anyway. Out of habit, out of hope that maybe this time would be different. "Helen, I have an amazing opportunity in Miami. It's a business conference. Life-changing, really. The kids can't miss school, so I'll leave them with you. After all, you don't do anything anymore. You can watch them while I travel." I tried to protest, to explain that I had plans, but she steamrolled right over me. "Don't play deaf." I said, "I'm dropping Aiden, Chloe, and Leo off tomorrow. It's perfect. Now that you're not working, you have all the time in the world." I felt my blood boil. This woman, who had never worked an honest day in her life, who lived off my son's hard work, was telling me I did nothing. I wanted to shout, to tell her about the years I'd spent sacrificing, the dreams I'd buried, the nights I'd lain awake worrying about the future. But I didn't. I just smiled, ended the call, and sat in the silence that followed. That silence was deafening. It was the sound of all the things I'd never said, all the boundaries I'd never set. In that moment, as the phone still trembled in my hand, I made the most important decision of my 67 years. I decided to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The next morning, she arrived in a flurry of perfume and impatience, barely glancing at me as she rattled off instructions. "No sweets, no TV after 8, and make sure Chloe takes her allergy meds. I'll text you if I think of anything else." She kissed the children quickly, more out of habit than affection, and swept out the door, already on her phone making plans for her trip. The children stood in the hallway, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, eyes wide and uncertain. I knelt down, smoothing Chloe's hair and squeezing Aiden's hand. "We're going to be just fine," I said softly, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, them or myself. As the door closed behind Brooke, I felt a wave of heartbreak and anger crash over me. I had always tried to be the peacemaker, the one who kept the family together, but I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest any longer. I was tired of being taken for granted, tired of being told I was useless just because I'd finally reached a point in life where I could breathe. I watched her car disappear down the street, the children's voices echoing in the empty house. I knew, in that moment, that something had to change. I wasn't just going to let her walk all over me. Not this time. What would I do next? Even I didn't know for sure. But as I stood in the quiet house, the weight of years pressing down on me, I realized I was done being invisible. And as I looked at the children, my grandchildren, my heart, I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. before I could move forward, I had to understand how we'd gotten here. And so, as the house settled into an uneasy silence, my mind drifted back to the beginning, to the choices and sacrifices that had led me to this moment. The beginning was not a single moment, but a lifetime of small decisions, each one shaping the woman I became, and the family I tried so hard to hold together. I remembered the early years, when I was still Linda Evans, a young mother with a head full of dreams and a heart determined to give my son, Eric, the world. Back then, our lives were simple but full. I worked as a school secretary, juggling paperwork and playground squabbles, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. My days were long, but I never complained. I believed in hard work, in showing up, in doing what needed to be done even when no one was watching. Eric was my pride and joy. He was a bright, sensitive boy, quick to laugh and quicker to help. After his father died in a car accident, it was just the two of us against the world. I poured everything I had into raising him, late-night study sessions, scraped-together birthday parties, and quiet talks on the porch about right and wrong. I wanted him to know that love was not just a feeling, but 1,000 small acts of care and sacrifice. When Eric brought Vanessa home for the first time, I saw the hope in his eyes. She was beautiful, confident, and full of ambition. I welcomed her with open arms, eager to believe that she would be the partner he deserved. In those early days, Vanessa was charming and attentive. She brought flowers when she visited, helped clear the table after dinner, and laughed at Eric's old stories as if she'd heard them for the first time. I let myself believe that our family was growing, that the years of struggle were finally giving way to something easier, something brighter. But as time passed, small cracks began to show. Vanessa's ambition, which I had admired, started to feel like restlessness. She was always chasing the next big thing, a new job, a new car, a new friend. She talked about success as if it were a race, and anyone who slowed her down was an obstacle. I noticed the way she dismissed Eric's quiet contentment, the way she rolled her eyes when he suggested a night in instead of a night out. Still, I told myself it was just the adjustment of newlyweds, that love would smooth the rough edges. When their first child, Chloe, was born, I hoped it would bring them closer. For a while it did. I watched Eric cradle his daughter with awe, and Vanessa seemed softer, more grounded. I helped where I could, babysitting, cooking meals, folding tiny clothes. I was happy to be needed, to be part of their lives. But as the years went by and their family grew, so did the distance between us. Vanessa's gratitude faded, replaced by expectation. She stopped asking for help and started demanding it, her requests edged with impatience. I remember one afternoon, standing in their kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, while Vanessa scrolled through her phone. "You don't mind picking up the kids from school, do you?" she asked, not looking up. "I have a hair appointment and Eric's working late." I nodded, as I always did, but something in her tone made me pause. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement of the effort it took to rearrange my day. It was as if my time belonged to her, as if my own plans were invisible. The pattern continued. Vanessa's requests became more frequent, her gratitude more rare. She would drop the children off with barely a word, her mind already on her next appointment or trip. Eric, caught between us, tried to keep the peace. He would call me later, apologizing for Vanessa's tone, promising things would be different. But nothing changed. I watched as the warmth of our family gatherings cooled, replaced by a polite distance that left me feeling like a guest in my own life. Still, I tried to hold on to the good memories. I remembered birthday parties in the backyard, Chloe's first steps, the way Eric would light up when he talked about his work. I clung to those moments, hoping they would be enough to carry us through the hard times, but the respect I had once felt from my family was slowly eroding, worn down by Vanessa's constant reminders that I was no longer needed, no longer important. There were signs I had ignored, signs that would soon become impossible to overlook. The way Vanessa spoke to me in front of the children, her voice sharp and dismissive. The way Eric avoided conflict, retreating into silence rather than standing up for me. The way I found myself shrinking, making myself smaller so as not to cause trouble. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would get better, but deep down, I knew the truth. The family I had worked so hard to build was slipping away. and I didn't know how to stop it. Now, as I stood in my quiet house, the echoes of the past swirling around me, I steeled myself for the days ahead with the grandchildren. I knew that something had to change, that I could no longer accept being treated as an afterthought. The time had come to reclaim my voice, to remind my family and myself of the strength and dignity I still carried within me. The first few days with the grandchildren were a blur of routines and small joys. Chloe and Aiden bickered over board games, little Leo trailed after them with his favorite stuffed bear, and the house filled with the kind of noise I hadn't heard in years. I made pancakes for breakfast, packed lunches with handwritten notes, and read bedtime stories until their eyelids fluttered shut. For a while, I let myself believe that this was enough, that I could find purpose in these simple moments, even if it meant putting my own dreams on hold once again. But as the days passed, I began to notice things that didn't add up. Vanessa had left in such a hurry that she'd forgotten a folder on the kitchen counter. I meant to set it aside, but when I picked it up, a stack of unopened credit card bills slipped out. The balances were staggering, thousands of dollars spent on hotels, restaurants, and boutiques in cities I knew she'd never mentioned to Eric. My heart pounded as I flipped through the statements, each one more alarming than the last. I tried to push the worry aside, telling myself it wasn't my place to pry. But then, while searching for Chloe's allergy medicine in Vanessa's desk drawer, I found a second phone. It was tucked beneath a pile of receipts, its screen dark and smudged. I hesitated, but curiosity and a growing sense of dread got the better of me. I pressed the power button, and the phone lit up with a flurry of notifications. Messages from names I didn't recognize, photos of Vanessa in places she'd never told us about, and a string of texts that made my stomach twist. One message caught my eye. "Can't wait to see you in Paris next month. Don't worry, Eric suspects nothing." Another. "The money's coming through. Just keep playing the part." I scrolled through the conversations, my hands trembling. There were references to business deals, to secret meetings, to a life Vanessa had carefully hidden from all of us. It was clear her trips weren't just vacations, they were cover for something else, something that felt dangerous and deeply wrong. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone and bills spread out before me, my mind racing. I thought of Eric, working late to provide for his family, trusting Vanessa to be honest with him. I thought of the children, their innocence, their trust in the adults who were supposed to protect them. The weight of what I'd discovered pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but the evidence was undeniable. That night, after the children were asleep, I stood at the window, staring out at the quiet street. My reflection in the glass looked older, more tired than I remembered. I felt caught between two impossible choices: expose Vanessa and risk shattering my son's world, or stay silent and become complicit in her lies. The dilemma gnawed at me, every instinct as a mother and grandmother warring with the fear of what the truth might do to our family. I remembered the sacrifices I'd made for Eric, the promises I'd kept, the nights I'd spent worrying about his happiness. I couldn't bear the thought of him being hurt, of the children losing the stability they needed. But I also knew I couldn't ignore what I'd found. Vanessa's secrets were a threat, not just to Eric, but to all of us. The next morning, I watched the children eat their cereal, laughing at a silly cartoon, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. I realized then that my role wasn't just to keep them safe for a few weeks, it was to protect them from a truth that could upend their lives. I had to be careful, to gather more information before making any decisions. I owed it to my family to get this right. Could I protect my grandchildren and my son from the truth? The question haunted me as I tucked the phone and bills away, my resolve hardening. I would not let Vanessa's lies destroy the family I had worked so hard to build. Quietly, carefully, I decided to investigate further, determined to uncover the full extent of her secret life, no matter where it led. The days that followed were a test of every ounce of patience and strength I had left. I woke early to the sound of little feet padding down the hallway, the children's laughter echoing through the house as they raced to the kitchen for breakfast. I smiled and poured their cereal, but inside my mind was a storm of questions and worry. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Vanessa, checking in on the kids or worse, demanding something new. But her messages were brief and impersonal, photos of beaches, cocktails, and city lights, as if she were determined to prove how far away she was from the responsibilities she'd left behind. I tried to keep things normal for the children. We baked cookies, built pillow forts, and spent afternoons at the park. But even as I read stories and bandaged scraped knees, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living on borrowed time. The folder of credit card bills and the secret phone weighed on me like a stone in my pocket. I checked the phone in stolen moments, piecing together Vanessa's web of lies. There were more messages, some about money, others about meetings in cities I knew she'd never told Eric about. There were even photos of her with people I didn't recognize, her smile wide and carefree, a woman I barely knew. One evening, as I tucked Leo into bed, he looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes. "Grandma, when is Mommy coming home?" he asked, his voice small. I brushed the hair from his forehead and forced a smile. "Soon, sweetheart. She'll be back before you know it." But the words tasted like ash. I wondered what kind of mother could leave her children so easily. What kind of wife could lie so convincingly? Eric called every night, his voice tired but grateful. "Thanks for helping, Mom. I know it's a lot. Vanessa says the trip is going well. She's making great connections." I wanted to scream, to tell him everything I'd found, but I held back. He sounded so hopeful, so desperate to believe that his wife was finally finding her place in the world. I didn't want to be the one to shatter that illusion, not yet. But the pressure was mounting. Vanessa's behavior became more brazen. She posted photos online of expensive dinners, shopping sprees, and parties with people I'd never seen before. She sent the children gifts from luxury stores, each one accompanied by a note that felt more like a performance than a gesture of love. "Miss you so much. Mommy will bring you something special from Paris." Chloe clung to the gifts, but Aiden started to ask questions. "Why does Mommy always go away? Why doesn't she call us at bedtime?" I tried to answer honestly, but the truth was too complicated for a child to understand. I found myself growing resentful, not just of Vanessa, but of all the times I'd let her take advantage of my kindness. I remembered the early days when she'd first joined our family. She'd been charming, attentive, eager to please. But over time, her requests had turned into demands, her gratitude into expectation. I'd let it happen, telling myself it was easier to keep the peace than to confront her. Flashbacks haunted me, moments when I'd bitten my tongue instead of speaking up, when I'd rearranged my life to accommodate Vanessa's whims. I remembered the Christmas she insisted on hosting, only to leave me with all the cooking and cleaning while she entertained her friends. I remembered the birthday party, where she forgot to pick up the cake, leaving me to scramble at the last minute. Each memory was a reminder of how I'd allowed myself to be sidelined, how I'd let my own needs disappear in the shadow of her ambition. Now, as I watched the children play, I felt a surge of guilt. Had I failed them by not standing up to Vanessa sooner? Had I failed Eric by letting him believe everything was fine? The questions gnawed at me, but I knew I couldn't change the past. All I could do was protect them now, even if it meant risking the fragile peace that held our family together. The more I uncovered, the more unsettled I became. I found receipts for wire transfers to foreign accounts, emails about investments that sounded suspiciously like scams, and messages from people who seemed to know Vanessa far better than her own husband did. I started to wonder if she was in trouble, if her lies were about more than just money and freedom. Was she running from something? Or was she simply chasing a life she thought she deserved, no matter the cost? Eric's calls became less frequent, his tone more strained. "Vanessa says she might extend her trip. She's got a big opportunity in London." I could hear the worry in his voice, the cracks in his confidence. I wanted to reach through the phone and hold him, to tell him that he wasn't alone. But I knew he wouldn't believe me, not until he saw the truth for himself. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, Chloe came into the room, clutching a letter she'd found in Vanessa's closet. "Grandma, is this for you?" she asked, her eyes wide. I took the envelope, my hands trembling. Inside was a contract, Vanessa's signature at the bottom, agreeing to a business deal with a man I'd never heard of. The terms were vague, but the amount of money involved was staggering. I felt sick. What had Vanessa gotten herself into? And what would happen to our family if it all came crashing down? The children sensed my unease. They became clingier, more anxious, their laughter fading into nervous whispers. I tried to shield them from my worry, but I knew they could feel the tension in the air. I found myself watching the clock, counting down the days until Vanessa's return, dreading what she might bring with her. But as the days passed, something inside me shifted. I realized I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for. I was tired of being afraid, tired of letting Vanessa control the narrative. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything I found, every receipt, every message, every lie. I reached out to an old friend, a retired social worker, for advice. She listened patiently, offering support and guidance. You have to protect yourself, Linda, and you have to protect those children. Don't let fear keep you silent. Her words gave me courage. I began to see Vanessa's manipulation for what it was, a pattern of control, a way to keep everyone off balance. I stopped making excuses for her, stopped blaming myself for her choices. I started to believe that I could make a difference, that I could stand up for my family, even if it meant standing alone. But as Linda dug deeper, she uncovered a secret that changed everything. Hidden in a folder at the back of Vanessa's closet, beneath a pile of old tax returns, was undeniable proof of betrayal, a set of documents that would force Linda to make the hardest decision of her life. The folder was heavier than it looked, as if it carried not just paper, but the weight of every suspicion I'd tried to ignore. I waited until the children were asleep, their soft breathing a fragile comfort in the quiet house, before I dared to open it. My hands shook as I spread the contents across the kitchen table. Heart pounding with every new revelation, there were photos, Vanessa in expensive restaurants, arm in arm with men I'd never seen, her smile wide and careless. Some were stamped with dates that matched the business trips she'd told Eric about, but the locations were all wrong. Paris, Milan, Dubai. In one, she wore a diamond necklace I'd never seen before, her hand resting on a man's shoulder, his face turned away from the camera. I felt a cold wave of dread. This wasn't just about money or ambition. This was betrayal, plain and simple. The receipts were worse. Thousands of dollars spent in cash at luxury boutiques, wire transfers to foreign accounts, and hotel bills for suites that cost more in a night than I'd ever spent in a month. There were emails too, some in English, others in languages I didn't recognize. I used a translation app, my heart sinking as I read the words, "The package will be delivered as promised. Payment expected in full." Another, "No police. No questions. You know the rules." The messages were cryptic, but the meaning was clear. Vanessa was involved in something illegal, something that could destroy our family if it ever came to light. I sat at the table, the evidence spread before me, and felt the world tilt beneath my feet. I thought of Eric, of the trust he'd placed in Vanessa, of the children sleeping just down the hall. How could I protect them from this? How could I tell them that the woman they loved was living a double life, risking everything for reasons I couldn't begin to understand? The moral weight of the decision pressed down on me. If I exposed Vanessa, the scandal would tear our family apart. The children would be caught in the crossfire, their lives upended by headlines and whispers. Eric would be devastated, forced to choose between the truth and the illusion he'd clung to for so long. But if I stayed silent, I would be complicit in Vanessa's lies, allowing her to continue down a path that could end in disaster for all of us. I thought back to my own mother, a woman of quiet strength who had always told me, "The truth will set you free, but it might break your heart first." I'd spent my life believing that honesty was the foundation of love, that secrets only grew heavier with time. But now, faced with the reality of Vanessa's betrayal, I understood how easy it was to justify silence. To convince yourself that you're protecting the people you love when you're really just protecting yourself from pain. I paced the kitchen, the clock ticking loudly in the silence. I imagined the fallout, Eric's heartbreak, the children's confusion, the shame that would follow us everywhere. But I also imagined what might happen if I did nothing. What if Vanessa's schemes caught up with her? What if the police came knocking, or worse, the people she was dealing with decided to settle things their own way? The risk was too great. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I gathered the photos, receipts, and messages, tucking them back into the folder. My hands were steadier now, my resolve hardening with every step. I knew I couldn't confront Vanessa alone, not yet. I needed advice, someone I could trust to help me navigate the minefield ahead. My mind went to Margaret, my oldest friend, a retired lawyer who had seen her share of family scandals and always knew how to find the right path through the darkness. Linda realized she was in over her head, but she couldn't turn back now. The truth was out, and the only way forward was through it. Quietly, I decided to gather more evidence, to document everything, and to reach out to Margaret for guidance. I owed it to my son, to my grandchildren, and to myself to see this through, no matter how painful it might become. I called Margaret the next morning, my voice barely steady as I explained what I'd found. She listened in silence, her years as a lawyer making her patient and precise. When I finished, she didn't gasp or scold. She simply asked, "Do you have everything documented?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and described the folder, the photos, the receipts, and the messages. "Good," she said. "You need to keep copies. Scan everything. If Vanessa is involved in something criminal, you'll need proof, not just for Eric, but for the authorities, if it comes to that." Margaret's calm steadied me. She came over that afternoon, her presence a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. We sat at the kitchen table, the evidence spread between us, and she helped me organize it all, photos in one pile, financial records in another, messages printed and translated. "You're doing the right thing, Linda," she said gently. "But you have to be careful. If Vanessa suspects you know, she might try to cover her tracks or, worse, lash out." I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I felt guilty for snooping, for keeping secrets from Eric, but I knew I had no choice. The children needed me to be strong, to protect them from the storm I could feel gathering on the horizon. Every time I looked at their faces, I was reminded of what was at stake. Meanwhile, Vanessa's behavior grew even more reckless. She posted photos online of herself at exclusive parties, her arm draped around strangers, her smile wide and wild. She sent the children expensive gifts, designer clothes, the latest gadgets, each one arriving with a note that felt more like a bribe than a token of love. Eric was confused, torn between pride in Vanessa's success and worry over her growing distance. He called me late at night, his voice tight with anxiety. "Mom, do you think Vanessa's happy? She's always gone, always chasing something. I just want our family back." I wanted to tell him everything, to lay the truth bare, but Margaret cautioned patience. "You need to be sure, Linda. If you confront her too soon, she'll deny everything, and you'll lose your chance to protect the children. Keep watching. Keep documenting. When the time comes, you'll know." So I watched. I listened. I became a detective in my own home, noting every odd phone call, every unexplained withdrawal from the bank, every time Vanessa's stories didn't add up. I started locking the folder in my bedroom closet, checking it every night to make sure nothing had been disturbed. I felt like I was living a double life, loving grandmother by day, silent investigator by night. The guilt gnawed at me, but so did the fear. What if Vanessa found out? What if Eric turned against me, believing his wife's lies over my warnings? I replayed every conversation, every moment of doubt, searching for reassurance that I was doing the right thing. Margaret reminded me, "You're not just protecting yourself, Linda. You're protecting your grandchildren. You're giving Eric a chance to see the truth for himself." As the days passed, my determination grew. I stopped apologizing for my suspicions, stopped second-guessing my instincts. I started to see Vanessa's manipulation for what it was, a desperate attempt to keep control, to keep everyone dancing to her tune. I realized I wasn't powerless. I had a voice, and I was finally ready to use it. But just as I thought I had everything under control, Vanessa made a move I never expected. One evening, as I was helping Chloe with her homework, the front door burst open. Vanessa stood in the entryway, her suitcase at her feet, her eyes wild and accusing. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Why are you going through my things, Linda? Why are you turning my family against me?" The children froze, their pencils dropping to the table. I felt my heart race, but I stood my ground. I glanced at Margaret, who had come by to check on us, and saw her give me a small, encouraging nod. It was time. The confrontation I'd been dreading was here, and there was no turning back. Vanessa's sudden return sent a shockwave through the house. The children shrank back, their eyes darting between their mother and me, sensing the storm that was about to break. Margaret stood quietly by the kitchen doorway, her presence a silent reassurance. I took a steadying breath, feeling my heart pound in my chest, and met Vanessa's glare head-on. She dropped her suitcase with a thud and strode into the kitchen, her voice trembling with fury. "I want to know what you've been doing in my things, Linda. I want to know why you're poisoning my children against me." I kept my voice calm, though my hands shook beneath the table. "I haven't poisoned anyone, Vanessa, but I have been protecting them, and Eric. From you." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw something flicker, fear, maybe, or guilt. Protecting them from what? From their own mother? You're unbelievable. You've always resented me, haven't you? You never thought I was good enough for your precious son. I felt the old ache of all the years I'd tried to welcome her, to make her feel like family. I wanted to believe you loved Eric. I wanted to believe you cared about these children. But I can't ignore what I've found. Not anymore! Vanessa's voice rose, shrill and desperate. You went through my private things? You had no right. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand not being the center of attention. I stood, my knees weak, but my resolve stronger than ever. I had every right. When you left your children with me, you made me responsible for their safety. And when I found evidence that you were lying to all of us, I had a duty to find out the truth. She laughed, but it was hollow. What truth? That I wanted more out of life than this? That I needed a break? You think you're so perfect, Linda, but you have no idea what it's like to be me. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice steady. No, Vanessa, I don't know what it's like to be you. But I do know what it's like to sacrifice for your family. I know what it's like to put your dreams on hold for the people you love. And I know what it's like to be lied to. She glared at me, her hands clenched into fists. You don't understand anything. You never have. Eric never stood up for me. He always ran to you. You made sure of that. I shook my head, feeling the years of frustration and heartbreak rise to the surface. Eric loved you. He trusted you. He believed in you, even when you gave him every reason not to. But you took advantage of that trust. You lied to him, to all of us. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. You think you're so clever, don't you? Snooping through my things, turning my own children against me. You have no idea what I've been through. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Then tell me, Vanessa. Tell me what you've been through. Tell me why you've been sending money overseas. Why you've been meeting with strangers in cities you never told Eric about. Tell me why you've been living a double life. She faltered, her bravado slipping for just a moment. You don't know what you're talking about. I reached for the folder Margaret had helped me prepare, sliding it across the table. I know enough. I know about the wire transfers, the fake business trips, the messages you tried to hide. I know about the man in Paris, the one you told Eric was just a client. I know about the deals you made behind his back. Vanessa's hands shook as she opened the folder, her eyes scanning the evidence. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of paper rustling. Then she slammed the folder shut, her voice breaking. You had no right. I met her gaze, my own voice trembling. I had every right. You put this family in danger. You put your children in danger. I couldn't stand by and let it continue. Eric's voice came from the hallway, quiet but firm. What's going on? He stepped into the kitchen, his face pale, his eyes searching mine for answers. Vanessa spun to face him, her anger turning to desperation. Eric, she's trying to ruin us. She's been spying on me, turning the kids against me. She's jealous, she always has been. Eric looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom? I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. Eric, I found things. Things you need to see. Vanessa hasn't been honest with you. She hasn't been honest with any of us. He took the folder from the table, his hands shaking as he flipped through the pages. With each new piece of evidence, his face grew more drawn, his shoulders sagging under the weight of betrayal. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with pain. Vanessa, is this true? She tried to reach for him, her voice pleading. Eric, please, you have to understand. I did it for us. I did it for the kids. I just wanted a better life. He pulled away, his voice breaking. You lied to me. You lied to all of us. How could you? Tears streamed down Vanessa's face, her anger dissolving into anguish. I was drowning, Eric. I felt trapped. I needed to feel alive again. I never meant to hurt you. Eric shook his head, his own tears falling. You hurt all of us, Vanessa. You hurt our children. The children watched from the doorway, their faces pale and frightened. I knelt beside them, pulling them close, whispering words of comfort I wasn't sure I believed. Margaret stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder, her presence a steady anchor in the chaos. Vanessa sank into a chair, her head in her hands. What happens now? She whispered. I looked at Eric, at the children, at the woman who had upended our lives. Now we face the truth. Now we decide what kind of family we want to be. The silence that followed was heavy with grief and uncertainty. I knew that nothing would ever be the same, that the wounds Vanessa had inflicted would take years to heal. But I also knew that we had a chance to rebuild, to forgive, to move forward. But the fallout from this confrontation would change everything, for better or worse. The days after the confrontation passed in a haze of questions, tears, and difficult decisions. Vanessa's secrets could not be swept under the rug. Margaret helped me organize the evidence for the authorities, and soon enough, the police came to the house. Vanessa was questioned for hours. She tried to explain, to justify, to blame the pressure of motherhood and the loneliness she felt, but the facts were undeniable. The wire transfers, the false business trips, the money that had vanished from the family's accounts, there was no way to hide it anymore. Eric was shattered. He spent long hours in the den, staring at the folder of evidence, his hands trembling as he tried to make sense of the woman he thought he knew. The children clung to me, their routines upended, their questions heartbreaking in their innocence. Is Mommy coming back? Chloe asked one night, her voice small. I hugged her tightly, wishing I could promise her a simple answer. Vanessa's world unraveled quickly. Friends who had once envied her glamorous life now whispered behind her back. The school called, asking about the children's well-being. The neighbors watched our house with a mixture of curiosity and pity. The police investigation moved forward, and though Vanessa was not arrested, she was forced to answer for her actions. She moved out, staying with a distant cousin, her visits with the children supervised and awkward. The woman who had once swept through our lives with such confidence now seemed lost, her bravado stripped away. Eric was left with an impossible choice. He loved Vanessa, or at least the woman he thought she was, but he could not forgive the lies. He turned to me for support, his voice raw with grief. Mom, what do I do? How do I move on from this? I wanted to give him answers, to tell him that time would heal everything, but I knew better. Some wounds never fully close. I told him the truth. You do the best you can. You put the children first. You let yourself grieve, and then you start again. The family was left to pick up the pieces. The children struggled with the changes, acting out in small ways, tantrums, nightmares, sudden tears. I tried to be patient, to give them the stability they needed, but there were moments when I felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I found myself awake at night, replaying every decision, every moment when I could have spoken up sooner, wondering if I could have changed the outcome. Margaret checked in often, her friendship a lifeline. She reminded me that I had done the right thing, that protecting the children and Eric had to come before my own comfort. You were brave, Linda, she said. You stood up for your family when it mattered most. I tried to believe her, but the guilt lingered. Had I destroyed my son's marriage? Had I robbed my grandchildren of their mother? Or had I simply revealed a truth that was always waiting to come out? As the weeks passed, the house slowly settled into a new rhythm. Eric took on more of the parenting, learning to braid Chloe's hair and pack lunches with silly notes. The children began to smile again, their laughter tentative but real. I found comfort in small routines, morning walks, baking bread, tending the garden. The scars were still there, but so was the hope of healing. Vanessa's absence was a shadow that lingered, but it no longer defined us. She called sometimes, her voice softer, more uncertain. She apologized to the children, to Eric, even to me. I listened, unsure if I could ever truly forgive her, but I tried to let go of the anger. Holding on to it would only poison what was left of our family. Eric and I talked late into the night, sharing memories, regrets, and hopes for the future. He asked me if I could ever trust again, if I could ever let Vanessa back into our lives. I didn't have an answer. Trust, I realized, is not something you can force. It is rebuilt slowly, with honesty and time. I told him, we take it one day at a time. We forgive when we can, and we protect each other when we must. But could I ever truly trust my family again? The question lingered, a quiet ache beneath the surface. I wanted to believe that we could heal, that we could find our way back to each other. I wanted to believe that love was stronger than betrayal, that forgiveness was possible even after the deepest wounds. As the family began to rebuild, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken. We had been broken, yes, but we had also been brave. We had faced the truth, no matter how painful, and in doing so, we had found a way forward. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. The seasons changed, and with them, the rhythm of our lives. The sharp pain of betrayal softened into a dull ache, and then, slowly, into something gentler, a scar, but not an open wound. I found myself waking up each morning with a little less heaviness in my chest, a little more hope that we could truly begin again. Eric and I grew closer in the months that followed. There were awkward moments, of course, conversations that started with blame or regret, tears that came without warning. But there was also laughter, the kind that comes from shared memories and the relief of honesty. We spent long evenings at the kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing, rediscovering the bond that had always been there, waiting beneath the surface. I watched him become a more present father, learning to braid Chloe's hair, to listen to Aiden's stories, to comfort Leo after a nightmare. The children, too, began to heal. Their questions about Vanessa grew less frequent, their smiles more genuine. They clung to new routines: Saturday pancakes, Sunday walks in the park, bedtime stories that always ended with a hug. I found peace in small things. I started tending the garden again, coaxing life from the earth with my bare hands. I baked bread, filling the house with the scent of warmth and comfort. I even dusted off my old sketchbook, letting my hands remember the joy of creating something just for me. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream, not just for my family, but for myself. One afternoon, I took the children to the old park where Eric used to play as a boy. The swings creaked in the breeze, and the sunlight filtered through the trees in golden ribbons. I watched Chloe push Leo on the swing, Aiden racing down the slide, their laughter ringing out across the grass. I sat on the worn wooden bench, the same one where I'd once watched Eric, and let the memories wash over me. I thought about the choices I'd made, the times I'd stayed silent, the times I'd spoken up, the moments I'd doubted myself. I realized that standing up for myself, for my family, had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. But it was also the most important. I understood now that love isn't just about sacrifice. It's about boundaries, about respect, about having the courage to say enough when you're being taken for granted. I had spent so many years putting everyone else first, believing that was what a good mother, a good grandmother, was supposed to do. But I saw now that I was allowed to have needs, to have dreams, to demand kindness in return for all I gave. Eric joined me on the bench, his arm around my shoulders. "Thank you, Mom," he said quietly, "for everything, for not giving up on us, for being brave when I couldn't be." I squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of his words settle in my heart. "We're all braver than we think," I told him. "Sometimes it just takes a little push to remember." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past was behind us, the future uncertain, but we were together. We were healing, and I knew, deep down, that I had done the right thing, even when it hurt. But what would you have done in my place? Would you have risked everything to protect your family, even if it meant breaking their hearts? Would you have found the strength to stand up for yourself, even when it felt impossible? These are the questions I still ask myself, even now, as I watch my family laugh and grow and forgive. The answers aren't easy. But I hope, wherever you are, you find the courage to choose what's right for you. If you've listened to my story this far, I want to thank you for sharing this journey with me. It isn't easy to talk about the moments when we feel invisible or the times we're taken for granted by the people we love most. But I believe that by sharing our stories, we help each other find strength, comfort, and maybe even a little bit of hope. Have you ever been taken for granted by your family? Have you ever felt like your years of sacrifice and love were overlooked, or that your needs and dreams didn't matter? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have risked the peace of your family to stand up for yourself? Or would you have stayed silent, hoping things would change on their own? I know there's no easy answer. Every family is different, every story unique. But I hope my experience reminds you that your voice matters, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to speak up, even when it's hard. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between keeping the peace and doing what was right for you? Did you ever have to set boundaries with someone you loved? Please share your story in the comments below. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs right now. And if this story touched you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Our community grows stronger with every voice, every lesson, every act of courage. And if you think this story was powerful, just wait until you hear what's coming next. In our next episode, we'll reveal another family secret, one that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and forgiveness. You won't want to miss it. So what would you have done in my place? I hope you'll join the conversation, because together we can find strength in our stories and hope in the truth. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of this journey with me.